Back in Maine, a nonprofit organization that focuses on the growth of businesses and communities in Maine held their annual meeting today in Bangor.
This year, they added something different to the agenda and included a Champion Award celebration.
The Maine Development Foundation called on community leaders from all over the state to discuss the future of Maine's businesses, communities, and prosperity. MDF seeks to connect people, instruct individuals on leadership, and create partnerships to embark on new ideas. This year, they connected with the creator of the Hopeful Project, who created a powerful aluminum sign that spreads positivity around 7 states.
We try to shine a bright light on what we're doing now and what we can be doing as a state to really create lasting prosperity for all Mainers.
As an artist, I'm really flattered that a piece of art that I created will work as outside of the art world and into the business community and become relevant to communities, to developers that become a significant participant in the Main Street development concept.
There were many organizations that presented their work and reasons why their services were needed in Maine, like the Teens to Trails nonprofit. A team who participated in the program shared her message about how community leaders helped create an experience that bettered her mental health.
If you want to learn more about the work of MDF, you can go to mdf.org.